Folks, welcome back to the garage. I'm out here today with my 2002 Honda VFR800, and we're going to do a little job that I've been putting off since I bought the bike a few months ago, and that is to change the fluid in its hydraulic clutch. Now, I really love this bike, and maybe I'll make a whole video about why I love it so much in the future, but for now, suffice to say that one of the reasons I love it so much is this hydraulic clutch system. And unlike most motorcycles, the maintenance on a hydraulic clutch is different from what you would find on one that's equipped with a cable-operated clutch. Now, on a cable-operated clutch, there's very little maintenance involved at all. You lubricate the cable sometimes, and you lubricate the little nubbin at the lever, and that's pretty much it. But on a hydraulic clutch, much like a car, periodically you need to change the fluid so it doesn't absorb moisture out of the air and become corrosive. And because I bought this bike used, I have no idea when that was done last. So for the sake of not getting stranded, we need to go ahead and do that now. So we're burning daylight. Let's get after this. Our process starts up here at the handlebars where our reservoir is. And before we go and take anything apart, we need to make sure that we can get this cap off so that we'll be able to refill the system once we're done. Obviously, if you can't refill the system and you let all the fluid out, you're in trouble. You'll notice here that my reservoir cap has two different fasteners holding it down. There's this weird bolt, and then there's what I suspect is the original screw. This is pretty common to see because these screws are very easy to strip. And the reason everybody strips them, and I've harped on this before, is on Japanese motorcycles, what looks like a Phillips is actually a JIS head, like this. Maybe I'll include a B-roll shot here that shows the difference between a Phillips and a JIS. But a JIS is a little bit less pointy, and as a result, it fits better into this JIS screw head. See that? This fits perfectly. There's no play at all, hardly. So before we get on with anything else, we need to make sure we can get this out. And you see, with the proper screwdriver, this one comes right out. And now we need to get this guy loose. And I've already checked, and that one is a 7mm. But hopefully your bike, if you're following along, will have regular JIS head screws in it. I'm going to go ahead and remove this one completely. Set that fastener aside. Are these the same thread pitch? Does this fit in this one? One thing you want to check whenever you find rogue fasteners like this in places they shouldn't be is the reason this was used that they destroyed the threads in there and cut new threads for some random off-the-wall size. If that were the case, we might consider replacing this master cylinder. Now that we've got those off, we can take our... Oh, are we dribbling? We're dribbling. Whenever you deal with brake fluid, you want to be sure to clean it off of any painted surface you get it on as soon as you can, because it's a more effective paint stripper than actual paint stripper. You're going to want to have some paper towels or something around to wipe it off, because I've never been able to handle brake fluid without making a mess. Anyway, there we go. We've got this loose, and now, in order to make it easier to deal with, we're going to turn our handlebars like this so that it's just about level. And that makes this a whole lot easier to deal with. So we can set our cap aside. We take our little plastic piece out and our diaphragm. Now with that off, we can move to the slave cylinder down on the side of the bike. Oh yeah, one more thing. Before we start the bleeding process, we need to get as much of the old fluid out of here as we can. The old fluid can sometimes have bits of corrosion and stuff in it that we don't want getting into our cylinders if we can avoid it. So instead of just flushing it through the whole system, which is an option, what we're going to do instead is get it out of there with something like this. I have a turkey baster that I use just for this purpose, and obviously it's pretty gross and you don't want to be handling food with this, but you could use just about anything like so I'm going to stick this in there and suck as much of the fluid as I can out. You want to be careful not to get air into the line, so you can't make it completely empty. There we go. I think that's about as much of it as I'm going to be able to get out of there. Obviously, before you proceed with the bleeding, you're going to need to put the fresh fluid into the reservoir. I'm using DOT4 brake fluid here. I don't have any allegiance to this particular brand. It's all the same. But you do want to be sure to use it out of a relatively new and fresh bottle. I didn't actually open this today, but I know when this was opened, and it wasn't long ago, and it'll be fine. So, with that filled, we're now ready to get on with our bleed procedure. Okay, here we are on the left side of the bike, and our slave cylinder is this guy right here. You'll notice it has a bleed nipple on the top of it. That's our clue. And also it has this hydraulic hose that comes from up above near the front. And the way that this works is there's a piston in here that when you squeeze the lever pushes a rod that way. And that rod acts on the release basket on the clutch to push the clutch plates farther apart. So what we need to do is we're going to break this loose and we're going to put a bleed bottle on here. We got to find something to steel to stick it to. All right, you know what? I may need to find something to put this on. All right, so we take our bleed hose, we stick it on the end of our nipple here. Now we're ready to open the valve. On the VFR800, this bleed valve is a 10 millimeter. So we'll take our 10 millimeter wrench and open it. Hopefully you can see that, but we're getting some fluid out of there now. And much like bleeding brakes, I'm going to squeeze the lever, and with the cap off, you want to be careful not to squeeze too fast so you don't slosh brake fluid all over the place. And then as you squeeze the lever, open the valve, and you'll feel the resistance on the lever go away. And then close the valve again, and then release the lever. And you squeeze the lever again, and open the valve, close the valve, and release the lever. And we're going to repeat this process until we get clean, new brake fluid coming out of the hose and into our bleed bottle here. So, once again, we'll squeeze the lever, open the valve, close the valve, release the lever. Squeeze the lever, open the valve, close the valve, release the lever. Squeeze the lever, open the valve, close the valve, release. And we keep doing that until we get new brake fluid coming out of here. Periodically, as you do the bleed cycle, you're going to want to check up here to make sure that the level in your reservoir is not getting too low. You also want to make sure that you don't have fluid leaking out and dribbling down any of your painted surfaces that you need to clean off. I'm looking good here, but I do need to add some fluid. So add the fluid there. Up, spilled a little bit. Wipe up any spills. Put that there. And then I like to put the little rubber piece back on there to help keep spills from getting out of hand. All right, back to the process. Squeeze the lever, open the valve, close the valve, release. Squeeze the lever, open the valve, close the valve, release. Squeeze the lever, open the valve, close the valve, release. Once you're confident that you're getting actually new fluid out of here, you can go ahead and tighten this back down. So we'll tighten that back down with our wrench. Disconnect your bleed bottle. And with this guy, it can be a little tricky because you got fluid in the hose. So I'm going to drain as much of the fluid as I can into the bottle. And then I'm going to pinch the hose off, take it off. And we'll set the bottle aside. Put our rubber cap back on there. And wipe up any spillage if there was any. And now, we're done at this end. All right, once you're confident you've got all of the old fluid out, you want to top off your master cylinder here. So we'll top this off. And then put the cap back on. So we've got our rubber gasket diaphragm thing. We've got our plastic guy there. And then we've got our aluminum cap. Goes on there like that. Then we put our fasteners back in. And I am going to have to find a source, hopefully that isn't the dealer, to replace this oddball fastener that they used previous to me. But that was working okay, so I'm going to put it back in for now. And I'm going to tighten that one down first, because it's at the bottom end. You want to get it where it's fairly snug, but you don't have to kill these. I'm not going to use a torque wrench on this because I don't think there would be a torque spec for what would normally have a screw on it and not a hex bolt. But suffice to say, you just need it snug. And then we can turn our handlebars back so that the windscreen isn't in the way, and run the other one down. And finally, we wipe up any spills with a rag or a paper towel. And there we go. All right, folks, that's all there is to it. We changed the fluid. We made sure that we didn't get air in the lines. What I didn't show here, because I didn't have air in my lines, was what do you do if you do get air in the lines? And the answer to that is you just keep bleeding. If you get air in the lines, typically what happens is that the reservoir up here goes dry and you suck some air in there. What you do is just keep repeating the procedure. Fill the reservoir back up and keep doing that bleed cycle until you get the air out at the bleed valve down here. And then keep bleeding some more until you're sure that you're not getting any more air out and you're just getting clean new fluid. And then button everything up like I showed. This job should be done every 2 years or so. So if you don't know when you last did it, it's probably due. And obviously, if your bike has a cable-operated clutch, you're exempt from this and you should go have a beer instead. But failure to do this can lead to failure of the master or the slave cylinder. And while those typically give you some warning before they just let go completely, I have had it happen in a car where the slave cylinder just failed catastrophically. And at that point, I had to have the car towed home. And getting a car towed home sucks almost as much as getting a motorcycle towed home. So do yourself a favor and do this job on schedule every 2 years or so that doesn't happen. These cylinders should last the life of the bike otherwise. Anyway, if you're having to do this on your bike, I hope this helped you out. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.